Bright light, big city, bad lighting. Here we go. Hi, I'm Lindsay Morgan Snyder, and we are going to talk about the inner critic because I wrote a book on it about 5 years ago almost. I wrote a book called Letting Love In, How God Renews Relationships by Crushing Your Inner Critic. I talk about the 10 lies that keep us from love. And when I talk about love, I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about learning to receive God's love. The Bible says God is love. It doesn't say he created love. It doesn't say he's the best at love. Although he did, and he is, it says that God is love. And I found that fascinating as a new Christian. And as I learned to connect and communicate with love himself, who is God, I found myself getting a ton of healing, soul healing, right? And I would say like mind, will, and emotions, right? Healing in my mind, healing in my emotions, and mental healing, emotional healing, and then healing in my will. What does that mean? Well, healing in your will means you are being healed from like your own way or, control that's usually rooted in fear. So healing in your soul usually means surrender, a form of surrender to God. Now, surrender can sound holy and like, good job, Lindsay, you surrendered. But the truth is surrender is more about trusting God, because when you trust that a good God loves you, it's easier to surrender to him, right? So I want to talk a little bit tonight about my book, about the process of writing my first book. Okay, because we're talking about the inner critic here, because I am launching my first ever live workshop about the inner critic at the end of this month. It's only $27, so Cheerios, that's a good deal, right? So I'd love for you guys to jump on there so we can talk lots more about the inner critic. But I'm going to do a series on how I had to overcome the inner critic in order to do certain things God was asking me to do. Also, certain things that I wanted to do. So I started writing a blog 12 years ago on my lunch break at my 9-to-5 job. And I was super terrified to post the first blog, like super terrified. I mean, I was shaking in my boots, you guys, like for real shaking my boots. And I remember it was like 6:00, like it was dark out. I was sitting in my office, work was over. And I was just like, had finished up my blog, staying after work, and I was just like getting ready to press it. I was so nervous, Lord. I didn't even know what I was nervous about. Like I could not put it into words. I didn't have any of the tools I have now to kind of sort through what things are and help them move out of my way. I just didn't know. And I had to just like kind of push through, which I think can work a lot of times, and it's great, right? So I did, I pressed publish, and I was so nervous about what my friends would think. I was kind of a newer Christian, so I felt like my friends who didn't know me that way were gonna think I was a total lunatic. Funny enough, like I remember a couple of them were the ones who actually commented on it, and that was really special to me. So the enemy is always lying to us. The inner critic is always trying to stop us from doing things that we are called to do by God, or that we just desire to do. Either way, he wants to keep good out of our life. Unfortunately, I know it's annoying, but it's true. And the inner critic is, kind of a conglomerate of things. It's not just the enemy. It's not just our own pain. It's kind of a conglomerate. So we'll talk more about that at the workshop. So I'd love for you guys to come. I'm going to put the link in the comments below. But, or show notes, wherever you're listening to this at. So, overcoming the inner critic in order to do what you want to do. I don't know how many of you want to write a book, but, after years of writing on a blog that no one really read, if I'm super honest with you, I felt God say, I want you to write a book. I want you to turn your blog into a book. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you guys what I did. I Googled it. I was like, how to turn a blog into a book. Yeah, that's what I did. And I saw this like 9-step process, and I'm like, great, 9-step process, So I started to kind of put it together. And then 4 years later, I finished it. Now you might wonder, why, Lindsay, did your blog that should have taken not very long to turn into a book? I mean, it was already written. All you had to do was literally turn it into a book. Why did it take 4 years, Lindsay? Well, let me tell you why. Because of the inner critic, right? Because there is a voice in our head that we often don't realize is there until we realize it's there. And I've had multiple friends and podcast guests and people say, I don't think I ever knew that voice was operating until I talked to you, Lindsay. I always just thought it was normal. A lot of people think this. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about me overcoming the inner critic when it came to writing my book. So, like I said, I had started it 4 years earlier, but I could just not finish it. Like, I'd worked on it and worked on it and worked on it for a long time. I was super diligent about working on my book. And there came a point where I, was just looking for paid work, because you don't make money writing a book usually. I mean, you can on the back end, but, on the front end, you're just putting your time and effort into something and no one's paying you for it. Welcome to entrepreneurship. So, but, to me, this was a call from God. This wasn't just like, I want to write a book, Like, I know enough to know that, like, these things that we desire to do, once we get them, they don't fulfill every single thing in our life. They can bring blessing into our life. They can bring goodness into our life. But, like, if we have a goal, like, we want something, which there are things currently that I want that I don't have. And there are things that you want that you don't have. And I get it. But sometimes in our mind, we're like, when I get that thing, I'm going to be okay. No, it's not true. You're not going to be okay. You're going to be you that got a new thing, and you're going to be happy about it. It's going to be a blessing in your life. But then there's going to be new things that you want in the future. And that's great. I mean, that means you are like growing and developing, and you're a healthy person, that you want better than what you have currently. So that's like a good thing, right? But the bad thing is when we just constantly focus on that thing that we want, and we think like, when I get that, everything will be better. No, it's not true. Like, it's not true. Like, there'll be some beautiful things, and then there'll be some other things, right, that we have to deal with. So for me, I was having trouble finishing my own book. So then I got hired to write not one person's book, two people's books. I wasn't qualified to write anyone's book. I had only ever written a blog. But the cool story is that one gal read my blog and she's like, I think you could help me write a book. And I'm like, I've never written a book before. And she goes, but I think you could help me write a book. And I'm like, I mean, okay. And, she paid me super, super well to help her. And we got her book to a certain point. And then I brought in someone else who I worked for to help her finish her book, which was amazing. Then I went to ministry school and at Bethel. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Bethel. Ooh, leave me a ooh in the comments. But then I went to ministry school and I was looking for work, and I met this woman who wanted someone to write her book. And I said, well, I could probably write your book. And so she paid me to write her book. And I wrote her book in 4 months. Now, let's remember, how long has Lindsay been working on her own book? 4 years. I know, there's a discrepancy. Why is that? I would say the inner critic. I didn't know it was the inner critic at the time. I didn't know what my problem was. A lot of times we don't know what the problem is. And so I ended up, after I had written this woman's book in 4 months while going to ministry school full time, I felt God say to me, okay, Lindsay, now you know you can write a book front to back. So you just wrote that woman's book in 4 months. So now it's time for you to finish your own book. And I thought, okay, yes, God, I'm a yes, God kind of gal. I mean, as much as I can be. Like, I'm far from perfect over here, but, I try. And I felt like, I said to God, well, God, what is my problem? I just felt like, I don't know what my problem is. I don't know why I can't finish this. Like, what is my problem? And I felt God very clearly say to me, you're afraid. And I was like, okay, God. I said, what am I afraid of? I wanted to know. And he said, you're afraid that you're going to lead people astray and that people aren't going to like you. And I was like, Yep, that's what I'm afraid of. You are right, God. And he kindly said back to me, you know what, Lindsay? Not everyone is going to like you, but do it anyway. And it was kind, but it was kind of directive too. It was kind of like a good dad. He was like, I get it, but we're going to do it anyway. And I was just like, okay, like this is God telling me this, like I'm going to do it. And he said, I want you to get off all social media until you finish the book. And it was like, I've never had a child, but it was like pushing something out of me, like that felt like it was kind of a natural to come out. I wish I could say it was like so easy and rainbows and butterflies and all the angels came to help me. Now look, I do think the angels came to help me. And I was at Bethel, like one of the most like, it's like Disneyland for Christians, So like I was there finishing this book, right? But the things I had to do in order to overcome my inner critic were hilarious. First of all, write 2 other people's books before I could even write my own, right? Because I didn't actually believe I could do it. So God had to bring this other thing into my life to prove to me, oh yeah, you can write a book, Lindsay. And I was like, then I had to like face the fact that like, okay, that is actually not a problem for me. Writing a book in 4 months, not a problem for me. So why is it taking me 4 years to write my own book, Lord? It was just crazy. And then there was this night of like, it was like a show your talent night. I can't remember what they call it. Talent show maybe? With my revival group, which is what they call kind of like your group that you're in for ministry school. And, everybody get up and they'd like play their guitar, their great music. They would sing, they would like do spoken word. They'd do something very like, dun-da-da. Well, I'm like, yeah, I don't play any instruments. I don't sing. So I'm just going to go to the show and watch, which is fine. But at the last minute, I felt the Spirit of the Lord saying, Lindsay, why don't you like stand up and read like the first chapter of your book? I was terrified. Now I like do improv. I just started. It's not like I'm a professional, but that's where you have to like make things up on the spot. It's like so like kind of crazy compared to what I was going to do then, which was not that hard. Like just stand on a stage with a microphone and like read the first chapter of my book. But you would have thought I was like jumping off a cliff. Now, you may be watching this and be like, I could totally do that, Linz. And maybe you could. But what's the next thing that you're getting ready to do, right? What's the next thing that you're getting ready to do? And what is that little voice in your head telling you about it? That's what the inner critic is. The inner critic is going to come in kind of unknowingly. He's kind of slimy. And he is going to sabotage or just procrastinate, or just say little things, discouragement, in how you shouldn't do whatever the next thing is. And the problem is, you sometimes break through one inner critic, and then you go to do the next thing, and there's another inner critic. Anyway, I'm not going to get too deep into the inner critic, because we just don't have time today, but I wanted to share the story of just how I had to break through one of the inner critics, a few of the inner critics, a few of the little critters when I published my book. So having to do this one thing, right? Having to like go up in front of this super safe crowd. Look, Bethel, they're like the most loving environment. So like you could get up there and like literally like spit in your hand and like wave it, and they would be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. So it's like this safest environment, right? So you could like be terrible and they'd be like, we love you, so it's like the safest place ever. I was reading something. I'm not even like, I'm just reading something I wrote and have written for a long time. But the fear was real. The fear was so real. And so, you would have thought I was jumping off a cliff, but I got up there and I read it and my hand was shaking and I was like standing really awkward. It was terrible. But doing that and then just getting kind of people's like, I don't know, just encouragement, was like, all right, I can do this. And then it was months later that I actually talked to God about what I feared. And, he told me, and I was like, interesting. And then, I did. I had to get off social media. I had to stop distracting myself, right? I had to focus, and I had to push, like I was pushing a baby out. My book baby. And, God met me at every step, but it was real. It was real. It was not and the angels flied in and did it for me. No, y'all, that is not the way it went down. It was not like that. It was at every step I had to push through, check my inner critic. What are you what are you saying? You know what I mean? What's coming in that is stopping me from doing what God is asking me to do? So it was pretty amazing. And it just didn't stop for a long time. I would get over one, and then another little friend would pop up, But as I kind of learned to, push through, I was able to get that book done. And it ended up being quite successful. And God did bring little angels to help me, like the angel who helped me finish the book, some angels who wanted to throw book parties for me, the 1,000 and some angels that bought the book, the people that left Amazon reviews that were beautiful and powerful, the people who emailed me and told me it changed their life. I was just okay, God, it's so powerful. So it's worth it, right? It's worth pushing through the inner critic in order to step into the next thing that you're supposed to be doing. The next dream maybe that you have. Maybe it's a call from God. Maybe it's a dream in your own heart that that God is let's go, So I know my thumb's weird, right? I don't know why it does that. Okay, anyway. So I just want to encourage you to come join us at the Inner Critic Workshop. It's only $27. So that's a pretty good deal, right? And we're going to talk about this, okay? We're going to talk about this. We're going to get you some breakthrough so that you can step into the next thing that you are called to do by God, the next dream you have in your heart. All right? Yay, God. Okay, see you later. Bye.